So I'm going to need you to be sitting down for this one. It's a doozy. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes trying to think of an intro for this story, but it has left me speechless. So enjoy. A couple months ago, I was in a D&D campaign with 9 players. One of the players was interested in running a campaign, and a lot of us were interested in joining. She had run one-shots before that went pretty well, and she had put a lot of effort into the lore of her world. She showed us a lot of art and described a long-running campaign that would have us travel the world over the course of decades, with our characters developing along the way. This had all of us pretty excited. Everyone from the first campaign, except 2 players and the DM, joined this campaign, along with 3 other people I hadn't played with before, but they were also excited to play D&D with us. The GM, who I will call Holly, had run a Fear and Hunger inspired campaign that had only lasted 2 sessions before the campaign died, so I didn't really expect this campaign to last long, despite her saying that it would. The mechanics of that campaign were not exactly D&D, slightly homebrewed to fit the Fear and Hunger format, like having to attack limbs first and the head being nearly impossible to hit. I found these mechanics annoying because I wasn't told in advance that I had done something wrong. I was only told when I had already done it. For example, I didn't say what body part I attacked, so I damaged the torso, which was pointless, and I was then told I should have attacked the limbs. But Holly had put months of planning into this campaign, so I assumed that the mechanics would be explained and consistent. I assumed wrong. The couple of one-shots Holly had run with our characters from the other campaign were pretty enjoyable. It was kind of railroaded, but I didn't really mind that much. The only thing that annoyed me was the antagonist. He was an arrogant, perverted, self-absorbed asshole cosplaying as a seductive Tumblr sexy man, and he was the exact combination of all of my pet peeves. I'm going to refer to him as Pervert. At the end of the one shot that I genuinely had fun playing, Pervert had us sign our names on a contract, which was obviously a trap. My character signed with a fake name, and 2 other characters, a married couple, signed with each other's name. Holly was then delighted to tell us that we just sold our soul, that Pervert now owns us, and that's where the session ended. I said, no, I signed the contract with a fake name, and Holly just kept talking about how Pervert had total control over us and we were powerless against him. It was a weird ending that I just chose to ignore. I expressed clear disdain for Pervert, and Holly loved constantly showing me art of him to get a negative reaction out of me. Every time she would remind me that Pervert could order around and force my character to do anything he wanted. I just ignored this thinking it was a bad joke, but in hindsight, this should have been a red flag for her campaign. Before I explain the events of the first session, I want to note the various information Holly gave out to different players. I was told this was a darker campaign, and there was a chance that my character could die. I was okay with this and had a backup character ready. Another player, Panda, asked Holly if his character would die in the campaign because he didn't want that to happen. Holly, at the time, assured him that his character wouldn't die if he didn't want him to. So far, so good. A different player, Ace, asked Holly if there would be combat in the first session so she could prepare, as she wasn't too familiar with the D&D combat system and she didn't want her character to die. Holly told her there would be no combat in the first session. Great. To clarify, all of these conversations were separate, so I knew my character could die, but Panda and Ace were under the impression that theirs wouldn't die. First session comes around, and guess what? There is combat. Ace's character dies. Ace was pretty shocked by this and had to sit there for an hour before her character got revived. She was very annoyed about this during the session, but I honestly didn't notice because I was having my own problem. As I said before, I knew this campaign was going to be homebrew with changes to the combat system, but I wasn't expecting the format for AC to be changed. When combat began and Ace's barbarian was attacked, Holly asked Ace to roll a d20. She did, and rolled relatively low, but Ace's barbarian got hit. I thought it was a saving throw at first, so I didn't mind, but then I realized that the d20 was rolling for AC. When I attacked one of the monsters, Holly rolled a d20 and said I missed. I and another player, Fish, noticed it and pointed out that's not how combat works. Holly said this was her homebrew system and everyone had to roll for AC. I tried to explain how that made everything unbalanced, but I saw I was making Holly upset and ruining the mood, so I stopped. I kept my mouth shut and didn't comment on any changes. Fish was confused by these new rules and asked questions to try to understand them, but every time Holly would get frustrated, so he stopped. The first session was very frustrating, but I gave Holly the benefit of the doubt. I hadn't DM'd before, so I couldn't criticize her much in that regard. I half considered leaving the campaign because of the homebrew system, but decided not to. I was told there wouldn't be a lot of combat, and I wanted to play more with my friends, so I stayed. The next session was traveling on a boat, and Holly gave us some options for what our characters could do. One option was training our ability scores by rolling a d6 and adding it to the score. Fish was baffled by this, but Holly assured it was just a one-time thing. I chose to roll the d6, and because of my lucky rolls when building my character, I now had a level 4 monk with 20 wisdom and 20 dexterity. Way too overpowered, but Holly had no problem with it, so I just continued with those stats. Holly's campaign had a lot of railroading, which is normal for new DMs, but the railroading was odd because she would railroad us in situations where we couldn't do anything. For example, the first kingdom we went to, everyone had to wear a mask. Some players had money to buy them, but one player, FIFA, wanted to steal one. Being a rogue, he naturally rolled high and got a mask. I didn't have enough money, so I tried to steal one too, and as an astral monk, tried to steal one with a spectral arm. I rolled really high, around the same as FIFA, and described my character taking the mask when Holly stopped me. Apparently, the stall owner saw me, even though he was talking to another player, and the ghost arm was hovering above his head. Holly said he was looking right at me, and he could see my character reaching for the mask. I said, no, I'm using my astral arms, they're not connected to me. But she kept ignoring me, trying to explain myself. So because I didn't steal the mask, I couldn't afford one, I couldn't do anything for the rest of the session. None of the NPCs would talk to me, so I had to leave the rest of the party so they could get information. I wouldn't have minded failing to check, but Holly ignoring the explanation I gave and then not letting me do anything because of the check she made me fail was really irritating. Once again, I thought about leaving the campaign, but I was really interested in other people's characters. I missed the next session, but I didn't care about missing the story. Instead, I felt bad about missing the roleplay. Throughout the course of the campaign, if I or anyone else tried to express concerns or problems with the campaign, Holly would get upset and shut down, so we would all just be sitting at the table in awkward silence. I'm not good at dealing with other people's emotions, so every time this happened, I would just stop talking for the rest of the session in fear of upsetting her again. Alright, I need to pause there. One of the amazing things about being a DM is building these amazing worlds and stories for other people to enjoy. And if one of your players says that they're not enjoying what is being built, you don't just shut down. You listen to their feedback and then get feedback from all your other players to compare and then make adjustments if need be. Shutting down and ignoring people and making the table awkward doesn't fix the issue. Anyway, back to the story. Around this time, the magic system was changed to the homebrew system. Instead of having spell slots, you use sanity points to cast spells. You regain sanity points by doing heroin, and then you become addicted to heroin. At level 4, you can have at most 3 spells from worshipping one of the homebrew gods Holly made. You can probably tell that the spellcasters were extremely underpowered, even more so since if a melee character worshipped a god, they would get 2 spells. These homebrew spells were inconsistent and sometimes just didn't work. I have one that let me perceive things others miss, and it never gave me any important information. Every time I cast this spell, Holly would give me the exact same description everyone else had gotten. Also, there was only one healing spell and no other way to heal people. But the healing spell caused the homebrew lust debuff, which can only be cured by having sex. A lot of us asked if the debuff could be different because some of the characters were asexual or the player didn't want their character to be forced to have sex. But Holly said the spell came from the goddess of fertility, so it couldn't be changed, and there were no other healing spells. The next session I joined, FIFA's long-distance girlfriend Maya was there. We didn't know her very well, but FIFA asked in advance if everyone was okay with her joining us. We were all happy to have her there, and she had fun role-playing with us. We all wanted her to join the D&D Discord server so she could see what was happening in the campaign, but Holly was the mod and wouldn't add her. When FIFA asked why, she justified it saying since Maya was in another country and she had only been in one session, it didn't make sense to add her. This would make sense, but one player in the Discord was in another country and another player had only been to one session. We tried to convince Holly, but she didn't change her mind. At the end of this session, Panda's fighter was captured and we were told very lightheartedly that he was going to be tortured. Panda was okay with this, but Holly didn't tell him in advance what exactly would happen to his character. As I said before, Panda cares a lot for his character. He wrote him as a victim of colonization who had experienced torture and lost his arm and leg. He has prosthetics that he is naturally very protective of and doesn't let anyone touch. So when Holly said his prosthetics were stolen from him, Panda was understandably quite upset. He argued that his prosthetics shouldn't be removed, but Holly just ignored him and continued on. Thankfully, we were able to retrieve and return the prosthetics. The whole situation felt weird, and it didn't help that the NPCs were very ableist towards Panda's fighter. Our other DM would talk to us about stuff like this in advance to make sure we were okay with it, so I assumed Holly was doing the same. I assumed wrong. The NPCs were always hostile towards us, especially Panda's fighter, but then Holly would complain that we didn't like her NPCs. They were all either sexist, racist, ableist, homophobic, or all of the above, so we all obviously hated them. I thought it was intentional and even complimented Holly's writing because all the villains were so enraging. At the end of the first arc, we killed the evil king and the NPC that tortured Panda's fighter was defeated but alive. Panda wanted to dismember the same limbs so he would know what it was like to lose an arm and a leg. Ace then wanted to gouge his eyes out as revenge for what he did to her friend. Holly argued against this, saying that only one eye was gouged out. Ace said, no, I want to gouge out both of his eyes, but Holly wouldn't let her. Ace eventually dropped it and the party left for the ship. Then the torturer and his family begged to be let on board. There were only 4 players left because everyone else had to go home, so we had to decide between us. FIFA's rogue was an asshole and wanted to bring him on board to see Panda's character's reaction, so he was trying to convince my monk, paranoid skeptic, to let him. Holly said there would be benefits if we brought him on board, so I conceded, even though it was out of character, threatening to kill the entire family if they try anything. The benefit was you can learn languages and get information from him, but the NPC, such an asshole that if you tried to speak to him, he would just insult you and you gain nothing. So we never spoke to him. Pretty sure Holly later retconned him losing his limbs too. Around this time, a secret romance plotline was planned between FIFA and Panda's characters. FIFA's girlfriend Mayo and Panda's boyfriend Fish were in on it as well, as myself and later on Ace. The goal was to have an enemies to kind of friends to lovers storyline over the course of the campaign. FIFA and Panda wanted to keep it a secret from everyone else, including Holly. The initial reason was the reveal would be a great surprise to everyone, but Panda later admitted he thought Holly wouldn't approve and wouldn't let the characters get together. Now I can talk about the DMPC. The cleric Holly played in the other campaign was a DMPC in this one. Her cleric was more cold and cruel in this campaign, which made sense considering the change in tone. The DMPC would often get into arguments with Panda's fighter, and it only got more and more frequent. She would often insult him for being a satyr, which was pretty much canon racism, but it was weird that she wanted her character to be a racist. Another strange thing is that my monk was also a satyr and was much more cruel to the DMPC, but she ignored me to target Panda instead. I would literally try to start fights with the DMPC so she would back off of his character, but it never worked. On the boat after the first arc, a massive fight happened between the two characters that affected their relationship for the rest of the campaign. Another relationship that changed on the boat was the DMPC and FIFA's rogue. His character was an asshole former model who was cursed by his ex-wife to have bug legs and other traits after cheating on her. But he was a model, so he was still attractive despite the insect curse. The DMPC and Ace's Barbarian had a little gossip session, and Ace's Barbarian admitted that she found my monk attractive, which we had previously agreed upon. The DMPC said she found FIFA's rogue handsome, but his personality was awful. We didn't take much notice at the time. but this was the start of the DMPC's crush on FIFA's rogue. The next arc, we were split up in different groups with a gang of warriors. One of them was the DMPC, FIFA, and Panda. FIFA and Panda were excited to develop their characters' relationship. They were stuck with the leader, an insufferable narcissist with an overwhelming god complex. He openly insulted the characters, compared us to ants, and once again was sexist, racist, and homophobic. We all hated him and began plotting a way to kill him, to which Holly said we couldn't kill him because he is really strong, you guys can't beat him. I didn't understand working a job for the most obnoxious NPC ever, having to accept being assaulted and compared to dogs with no other choice because he is too powerful to rebel again. It's not satisfying for the players whatsoever to just do as they're told by the most infuriating villain and not being able to fight back. The leader ordered FIFA and Panda's characters to bow, and Holly described them feeling compelled to bow. The two said their characters absolutely would not do that. Both of their characters were extremely stubborn and would rather die than be ordered around by someone else. After we all argued, Holly conceded and let them roll contested intimidation, but told them it'll be nearly impossible to beat. Panda had advantage on intimidation and FIFA had inspiration, so they both rolled ridiculously high. One of, if not both of them, got nat 20. Holly was visibly annoyed by this, but everyone else hyped and glad we could have some semblance of free will. In the other group, player not a part of the group had to roleplay an NPC. For example, Ace and Fish were playing their own characters on a mission together, but the rest of us played the NPCs Holly had made. If this sounds very confusing, that's because it was very confusing. Others had volunteered and prepared to do this. I didn't, but I had to roleplay an NPC anyway. This was very confusing and tiring, but I was told this story arc would be only one session, so I tried to grit my teeth and bear it. Ace and Fish were with a group of obnoxious sexist NPCs. Ace's barbarian had to pretend she was a man, and even though we joked about the situation, Ace was genuinely concerned about what would happen if the NPCs found out. The way the NPC Holly was playing talked about women was so weird, and I didn't understand how Holly wanted us to react to him. FIFA was meant to roleplay a womanizer NPC that was close with Holly's NPC, but he just didn't want to because it felt weird. She complained that we didn't like her NPCs, but all her NPCs just sucked. I was stuck with a bunch of idiots that I was desperately trying to ignore. We were looking for an artifact, and after we found it, we were trapped in a looping cave. We tried to investigate, it didn't work. We tried to have one person go one way and another the other, it didn't work. We tried to examine the artifact we found, it didn't work. There were no clues, no hints, no way to escape. I straight up asked, how do we get out? And Ollie said, we will get out next session because this one had taken longer than expected. I didn't show up next session. After the session I skipped, we were on an undercover mission and every night someone would have one of their organs stolen. Panda and I decided we would stay awake all night to see who was stealing the organs. It didn't work, and Holly didn't even tell us why our plan didn't work or what happened because we were on watch and should have seen something. We suspected some kind of magic, but I rolled a nat 20 on Arcana and sensed no magic. We had absolutely no idea how to investigate further. This plot point was never explained. We knew from the start that Holly had a certain idea for the storyline she wanted to fulfill, but we realized over time that she had certain ideas of what our characters should be, and she did not like us going against her vision. At one point, the characters had dreams that embodied one of the 7 deadly sins, or layers of hell that the characters embraced the most. Holly didn't ask Panda what sin he thought his fighter reflected the most. Instead, she just started describing Panda's fighter having a dream about wrath. Panda said that wrath didn't make sense for his character, who only fought out of fear, and that pride was more fitting. Holly refused to change the dream no matter how much Panda explained why wrath made no sense. Then, when Holly asked me what sin my monk would see, I answered wrath. Holly said that 2 players couldn't have the same sin, and Panda told her that my character could have wrath instead. Holly ignored him, and I just said envy so we could move on. After this, we were kidnapped. It started with combat, but Holly gave us disadvantage on every roll we made for no reason, and ignored the damage and effects we dealt. We were injected with syringes, no roll, we're just unconscious. Now, even though I pushed the attackers back 10 feet away from us. At this point, the railroading was extremely annoying and blatant. It wouldn't have been as bad if it was a tough fight. that we inevitably lost, but we literally weren't allowed to do anything in retaliation to being kidnapped. All of us were frustrated by everything, but we all enjoyed hanging out together, and the roleplay was really enjoyable, as sparse as it was. It never came up naturally in the story. We would have to interject to describe how our characters feel or react. The enemies to lovers arc between FIFA and Panda's characters was progressing, and we were all very interested, even drawing art and writing fics about them. But the DMPC was turning this into a weird love triangle. The DMPC would get into arguments with Panda's fighter every time they were in the same room now, and FIFA's rogue was always brought up. The DMPC would do anything FIFA's character told her to, and it got uncomfortable. It started small. She would make him food whenever he asked, but then it got to the point where she would sleep on the floor so he could get the full bed. FIFA thought it was weird. His character was an awful person that was very slowly getting somewhat better, but the DMPC was enabling him and letting him walk all over her. Panda would say in character that the DMPC should have more self-respect and not listen to him, but this would start yet another argument. It was clear at this point that Holly shipped her DMPC and FIFA's rogue. She, FIFA, and Panda made art of them together, and some of it was NSFW. The ship itself wasn't treated seriously or as if it was going to become canon. We had both mutual and one-sided romance in the campaign before, and it was always discussed in advance. Holly never discussed making the relationship official with FIFA, so I assumed she wasn't serious about making it canon. I assumed wrong. One day we were hanging out at FIFA's place when Holly asked if we had any suggestions for the campaign story. Some had little suggestions, and I decided to ask if we could change the combat system. In combat, when you roll and add to get the amount of damage you dealt, we would have to multiply that number by 15. Multiple players in the campaign have dyscalculia and struggle with this system. I and another player, Wires, are good at quick math, but the other players feel bad depending on us in combat and have expressed this before. I brought up changing the system to make it easier for those with dyscalculia, and Holly wasn't receptive. She said, "I asked you guys about the story, not the combat." Holly explained she didn't understand the D&D combat system, so she made ones she could understand. Roll hit, roll damage. It is pretty simple. This prompted 3 thoughts. 1. If you don't understand the D&D combat system, you should not be running a D&D campaign with combat. 2. By making the system easier for you to understand, you have made it more difficult for everyone else to understand. 3. You refuse to compromise and have shown that your player's experience is not worth even attempting to learn the actual combat system. I thought I was being too hard on her, so I let it go, assuring the others I could do the math for them in combat. After being kidnapped, we were trapped in a casino with the 2 host brothers. One only told the truth and one only told lies. We could only leave if we figure out who's lying, and we only had a couple of days to figure it out. We couldn't tell which brother was speaking because Holly used the same voice for them, and both of them ended every sentence with, "We're brothers, don't you know?" She eventually put on a makeshift eye patch every time one brother spoke. We would ask them yes or no questions, and neither of them would answer, instead rambling on a tangent before ending with, "We're brothers, don't you know?" Sometimes they would both have basically the same answer, and when we pointed that out, Holly would come up with an excuse or go on another tangent in character, ending every fucking sentence with, "We're brothers, don't you know?" It was impossible to figure out, and we were running out of time, so we just decided to break into their bedroom at night and threaten to kill them. We asked them a question with blades against their throats, and they both gave the same response. We were all confused and asked why isn't one of them lying, and Holly said they were off the clock. Fuck off. So we had to wait for the next morning, except we couldn't because now a group of people we knew nothing about was going to kill us, so we had to escape. I guess since we failed to figure out which one was lying and the time limit had run out, we could just escape anyway. Sure, we never found out which brother was lying or the identities of who were trying to kill us. Holly gave us an impossible task with a time limit, and when we failed, it didn't matter. We were just railroaded to the next arc. I couldn't make it to the next session, but when I asked the others, they said it went bad. Railroading, fighting with the DMPC, and not being able to do anything they wanted. It was the last straw for Panda and Fish, who wanted to quit. Panda felt his character was constantly being harassed and discriminated against, and he would not get the ending he deserved. Fish was also sick of this, as well as the railroading and homebrew mechanics. They weren't going to leave abruptly. They planned on playing a couple more sessions to complete their characters' arcs and have a satisfying ending. Our other campaign was in its second season and was coming to an end. Our DM for that campaign, Oak, invited Panda and Fish to join, as they had guest starred in the campaign before. The tone of this campaign was much lighter, and the penultimate session was a wedding. For the last few sessions, I noticed Holly's cleric, who was also the DMPC, was much crueler than usual. She and another player, Theo, made their characters enemies, but in a fun, light-hearted way. They were both very attached to FIFA's Bard, who was a cheerful young adult that they treated like a son and grandson respectively, and that fueled their rivalry. But the funny hatred Holly's cleric held turned into her trying to shoot and kill Theo's character and their character's husband while he wasn't looking. FIFA stopped her in character and lifted the mood, but it was a dramatic tone shift that made FIFA and my character's opinion of her change. Another victim of this tone shift was Panda's character. His character for this campaign was a sweet southern cowboy cleric priest that had been raptured last time he guest starred, and he had come back to officiate the wedding. Everyone was being silly, making stupid jokes, and just having fun, but Holly's character was being weirdly hostile to Panda's. When he asked why in character, Holly just responded, "I just feel like I hate you in another life." Panda was a bit taken aback and didn't understand why that meant she hated this character too, but we brushed it off to continue with the fun stuff. The next big thing happened outside of the campaign at Panda's birthday party. He had been playing his own campaign for a while and was really excited to talk about it. FIFA, Fish, Ace, Oak, and I had been invited to this campaign, and Holly was clearly upset by this. Panda explained he invited Fish, Oak, and I because we were all either DMs or going to be DM, and he has good chemistry with FIFA and Ace. Holly was hurt because she said she was the only DM not included. This isn't true. Wires is also a DM, and Holly wasn't a DM for D&D. She ran a TTRPG. She explicitly told Fish it was not a D&D campaign when he tried to talk her about the mechanics. Holly literally said, "It's not D&D, it's a TTRPG. If you don't like it, you can leave." By the way, she never told me it wasn't D&D, only that it was homebrewed. Holly was clearly very upset, and Oak tried to change the topic to playing a party game. Holly just said, "I'm not in the mood," and stormed out of the room and sulked in Panda's bedroom. Panda and Fish had to go and check on her. They called her mother to pick her up, and Holly refused to go home. She stayed at the party even though she was obviously upset, and announced that the next session, literally the next day, was the finale. Holly gave us less than 24 hours notice that the campaign was ending. Ace had said before and told her again she couldn't make it, but Holly said it was fine. Holly wanted to hold the finale the next day so we could play the normal D&D campaign that everyone wanted. We had never heard of this normal D&D campaign before. Beefy Fish and I stayed at Panda's place that night, and the topic of the finale eventually came up. We all agreed there was no way we would go to the finale or join the new normal D&D campaign. At the beginning of this campaign, I assumed that it would end suddenly and abruptly. I assumed right for once. Remember when Holly said that Panda's character wouldn't die? Well, Holly had revealed earlier that the campaign would end with everyone either dying or ascending. When Panda said she promised that his character wouldn't die, Holly said he didn't have to die. She had roles everyone could pick for their characters, but they couldn't tell anyone their role. Panda picked a storyteller role who would live to tell the story of those who ascended. This did not fit Panda's character at all, and because of the sudden finale, he thought the campaign would end with everyone dying horribly, including his fighter. This is when Fish revealed something that you might have already guessed. A couple days before Holly was venting to Fish about her life when the topic of D&D came up. She spoke about how she wanted to make her DMPC and FIFA's rogue get together, and then she explained why. Holly has a massive crush on FIFA, but she couldn't get with him. Basically, he has a girlfriend. So in her words, if I can't be with him, then I can make our characters get together. Oh, brother. Fish immediately told Panda, but they waited to tell FIFA because they just didn't know how to tell him. Holly had commissioned Panda to draw NSFW art of her and FIFA's character, and this revelation made him feel awful. FIFA had also drawn NSFW art and was completely shocked. None of us had any idea that Holly felt this way, and FIFA had not led her on in any way whatsoever. We then realized Holly's crush was the reason why she refused to add Mayo to the Discord. All of this made me feel gross and disgusted. We had Panda send a message on Discord saying we stayed up late drinking and we were too hungover to go to the finale. Panda then asked, since we and the others couldn't make the finale, if it could be postponed. Holly was upset and said it was mean to tell someone to postpone a session just because some people couldn't go. Fair enough, in a different situation, not when over half of the players can't attend the campaign finale. We had a one-shot at Pandas instead, where his and FIFA's characters finally got together and it was great. The finale for Oak's campaign was a week after the party. Panda and Fish were invited to join, but they felt uncomfortable, which we all understood. Oak wanted to have some form of assigned sitting to make sure the vibe wasn't weird. FIFA was uncomfortable around Holly, and I was still furious at her, so we tried to distance ourselves. I was hovering around FIFA a lot to make sure he was okay, and didn't get into a one-on-one conversation with Holly. I was definitely being too overprotective, but I was just so angry at the time. Every time Holly spoke to me, I was very curt with her because I didn't want to speak to her anymore. At one point, Holly asked FIFA why he wasn't opening her messages. He just said he was busy, then he changed the conversation and continued on with the session. The finale was great and I'm really excited for the next season. Over the next month, the finale for Holly's campaign kept getting rescheduled and people couldn't or didn't want to attend. We all knew the campaign was officially dead. Oak was preparing for a third season of their campaign and wasn't comfortable with Holly being there anymore. They had planned on writing a message asking her to leave with a few other people from their campaign. I was also writing a D&D campaign that I had to uninvite Holly from, so I asked to join. So we met at a bar and discussed what we we're going to do. I am very confused about the age of this group because the way they're all acting, they sound like school children, but then they're going to bars. Help. We were all pretty worried for Holly because she had recently started spamming people with reels because some of us had stopped responding to her. One of the players at the bar, Waz, wasn't even close to Holly or in her campaign, but she was sending him so many reels that it was freaking him out. We had Wires text Holly's mother in advance so she would have someone there to comfort her. Very soon after, Holly called Wires, but they didn't answer. A player in both campaigns, Ollie, wrote out a polite message asking Holly to leave. We all looked it over and Oak edited it to fit their own words. It didn't include any details related to FIFA, just that players were uncomfortable playing with her and her actions at Panda's party were concerning. Holly was understandably upset and sent paragraphs back pleading to stay in the campaign and saying that D&D was very important to her. We all understand this, but we don't feel comfortable playing D&D with her anymore. Holly claimed she felt terrible about what happened at Panda's party and she had an apology drafted for him that she was planning on sending him soon. It had been over a month since his party. Ollie got a paragraph-long apology from Holly about her actions at Panda's party and if she ever made her feel uncomfortable during D&D, but Ollie pointed out that she wasn't at Panda's party. FIFA also got a paragraph-long apology and we realized the apologies were copied and pasted. Wires got a different apology, but we suspect that was because Holly knew Oak and Wires were together to write the message. So she sent everyone else a copied and pasted apology because she didn't know we were all together in one place. Panda received an apology the next morning, but from what I heard from Fish, it was not genuine. That's pretty much where the D&D related stuff ends, but other fun friend group issues continue. They are mostly resolved now, but unfortunately another player decided to drop out of both my and Oak's campaigns because of all of this. Fish is planning a new campaign to continue on with Ace's, FIFA's and Panda's characters. I lost all attachment to my character sadly, so I'm going to be playing a new character along with Oak, who's going to be joining us. We also invited Mayo to join on video call for every session she can, but there are some other details that were revealed after the campaign died and other things I realized looking back. I might post all the other details that I only learned after the game ended another time. So this is the part of the video where I would normally have some kind of afterthought or reflection, but this one has stumped me quite a bit. All I'll say is all the red flags were there from the beginning. If your DM is showing any of these signs, have a conversation with them about it, and if they don't change, just leave. It's not worth the hassle. This all could have been prevented if you just left. Anyway, this has been an interesting one. I'll catch you next time.